Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the Psychology Club's event, Psychology of Ghosts. I wanted to take a second to introduce myself. I'm Becky Enco. I teach Psych 315, Biological Foundations of Behavior, the Brain, here at CTU. I'll tell you a little bit more about this picture later in the presentation. Tonight we are going to start by talking about our own beliefs in the paranormal. Why do some people believe and others don't? Then we're going to be talking about parapsychology, the branch of psychology associated with paranormal research. We'll also talk a little about the history of the paranormal, starting with ancient beliefs up to the present. And finally, we will wrap up by talking a little bit about how you can do your own paranormal research. So out of curiosity, how many of you believe in ghosts or spirits? Well, according to a 2019 Ipsos poll, 46%, so just less than half, of American respondents believe in ghosts. This is an increase from the 32% of respondents from a 2005 Gallup poll. So why do some of us believe in the paranormal while others don't? Well, there are a number of reasons. When talking to people who believe, I hear two statements most often. I hear, I believe because I've had something happen to me, I've experienced something that couldn't otherwise be explained. Or sometimes I hear, I believe because I have to believe in the afterlife. I have to know that there is something beyond life here. I hear that a lot in people who've lost children or have lost a spouse. There are a lot of things that can cause a person to believe that they're seeing spirits when they actually aren't, though. So, if it's not ghosts, then what could it be? Well, some spirit encounters have been traced back to hallucinations. For example, people with diseases like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease can suffer from hallucinations. When my husband's grandmother had Alzheimer's disease, one Christmas she had a hallucination that her father was in the toilet of the downstairs bathroom speaking to her from beyond the grave. This could be considered a paranormal hallucination. Our brains are also wired in a way that we look for patterns and we try to make connections. This can lead to things like matrixing pictures. That's when we find a face or a body in shapes or shadows in pictures, even when there isn't one there. There's also that need for meaning that I mentioned before, that need to feel like there is something beyond this life, and that can sometimes lead people to misinterpret things as ghostly encounters. For example, someone who has recently lost a loved one and is worried about if that person's okay or not might see or hear that loved one even if there is nothing there. There are psychologists who believe that ghosts are externalized versions of our internal trauma and conflicts. In fact, the field of anomalistic psychology studies how psychological and physical factors can lead to people perceiving events as paranormal, even when they have natural explanations. An example of this can be seen in some cases of sleep paralysis. In sleep paralysis, a person's mind is awake, but that person cannot move their body. That sleep paralysis can lead to visual hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, or even the sensation of feeling a presence in the room. Social and cultural influences can also impact our belief in the paranormal. If we come from a culture where it's frowned upon to believe in ghosts, then we likely won't. However, if we come from a culture where it's believed that our ancestors come and walk the earth with us to give us advice, we're more likely to believe in spirits. The increase in paranormal investigation shows on TV and on YouTube can also contribute to an uptick in belief in the paranormal. So there are plenty of reasons why encounters may not be actual encounters. That said, we're going to take a look at the other side of things. If we're going to talk about a connection to ghosts and psychology, I have to take a second to mention parapsychology. So parapsychology is the branch of psychology that looks at phenomena that is outside of orthodox psychology and is deemed inexplicable. Mainstream psychology views parapsychology as a pseudoscience. Now, a pseudoscience is essentially something that has beliefs, practices, or facts that cannot be replicated by the scientific method. For example, even if we have a recording of a voice of someone who's not in the room, we can't replicate that voice. We can't make a spirit speak to us on command so that others can verify that it was in fact a spirit talking. Now, parapsychology includes topics like extrasensory perception, or ESP, This is sometimes also referred to as a sixth sense. Information is received through some method other than our five senses. One example of this is telepathy. It's the communication of thoughts or ideas from one person's mind to another. You see the Zener cards on this slide. A tester would hold one of those cards with the symbol facing towards them, think about what that symbol is, and the person taking the test, in order to see if they have telepathy, would try to read their thoughts to determine what was on that card. Another form of ESP is precognition, which is the ability to see the future. Then we have what are often referred to as the clairs. There's clairvoyance, which is the ability to sense that events are happening somewhere else. There's clairaudience, which is sometimes called psychic hearing. It's the ability to hear things like voices of those who've passed on. Clairsentience is the ability to feel emotions or energies of others. Clairtendency, it's also called psychometry. It's the ability to get information about a person who possessed an object previously just by touching the object. Parapsychology also studies psychokinesis, which is the ability to move an object without touching it. And of course, parapsychology studies paranormal experiences. So I want to talk to you a little bit about ancient beliefs in ghosts, because I'm always surprised by people who think this is all relatively new. Now, while technology to investigate the paranormal has improved drastically, and TV shows have made it seem like it's a brand new thing, the belief in the paranormal is not all that new. There are many ancient cultures that believe in ghosts. Now, for the most part, these ghosts were not seen as friendly, nor were they welcomed. It was believed that the gods would return the souls of the dead to this world for a very specific reason. Perhaps they were murdered and the murderer never saw justice. Perhaps they drowned and the body was never found to be given a proper burial. The Romans also believed in what were referred to as household spirits. I'll share two of those kinds with you. There were lares, which were ancestral spirits that would visit family members, and there were larvae, which were malevolent spirits who would cause harm if not appeased. The Greeks actually categorized ghosts into those who were unburied, those who died too young, and those who died violently. Again, that same theme of returning because something didn't go correctly at the end of life. Questions about life after death and the belief in ghosts continued, and as technology progressed, so did ways to investigate these encounters. Real interest in communicating with spirits really began around the 19th century. This was the peak of spiritualism, the belief that ghosts and spirits were real and could communicate after death. We had modern scientists like Thomas Edison getting involved in spirit communication. Edison had a goal of making a spirit phone so that one could just call a deceased loved one. Now, he was a skeptic, but he was open to the possibility of there being some form of afterlife, even though he never got that spirit phone to work. At this time, seances were very popular. Seances are gatherings where people try to communicate with their departed loved ones. Typically in a seance, there is a leader who will open up the communication, and participants sit around the table in a dark room to wait for that communication. One of the best known seances is the one hosted by Mary Todd Lincoln in the White House, where she and her husband, President Abraham Lincoln, tried to communicate with their son. This, by the way, was not the first seance in the White House. Seances are still conducted today. Automatic writing is another tool that became popular in the 19th century. Automatic writing is, much like the name would imply, a person who believes they can communicate with spirits would allow their hand to be controlled by a spirit and the spirit would write through them. This is also the time that the Ouija board was first developed. These are also known as talking boards or spirit boards. It's a board with all of the letters of the alphabet, the numbers 0 through 9, and a yes or a no on it. The planchette is the little device that moves around the board to spell out a message. It is believed that spirits use their energy to move the planchette to the letters to spell out their message. The name Ouija, by the way, is actually trademarked by Hasbro. In the 20th century, more scientific methods and technologies were used to study the paranormal. It is also when the term ghost hunting was first coined. With figures like Hans Holzer and Ed and Lorraine Warren leading the way, paranormal investigation becomes more well known. Their research helped investigations to become more scientific and less guesswork. This is when some of the equipment that we still use today began to be developed. The 1970s saw the discovery of what we call electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. Now, I've heard a few stories about how it was discovered. I'll share two quick ones with you. One story is that a doctor was using a tape recorder to record his notes, and then he would send those off for transcription. The person doing this transcription asked the doctor about the other voices that were heard on the recording. He replied that he was alone in the room while doing the recording, so there shouldn't have been any other voices. The second story I've heard was that someone accidentally left a recorder going in an empty room overnight. In the morning, he discovered there were voices on that recording. There are EMF meters. So EMF meters detect electromagnetic frequencies, something that spirits are said to emit. Now, these were traditionally used to find things like electrical wires in walls. We also have night vision. So night vision allowed for people to see in the dark and to record videos of their nighttime paranormal investigations. This was something that had previously been military technology that just kind of started to become part of what civilians could get. Speaking of things civilians could get, there's also thermal imaging. So spirits are said to emit cold air. Thermal imaging, becoming available to the civilian population, allowed for people to see those cold spots. Sometimes, like in this picture, in the shape of a figure. Now, in 2002, a piece of equipment known as the Franks box was developed. It used a modified AM/FM radio that rapidly scanned through different frequencies, creating a white noise. It is believed that spirits can communicate through that white noise. Now, only 180 of these boxes were ever made. These Frank boxes gave way to what we now call spirit boxes or ghost boxes. The spirit box uses the same concept as the Franks box. It scans through either AM or FM radio stations to create a white noise that's believed the spirits can communicate or speak through. Now, if you've ever used an Xbox 360 and used the Connect feature, this next thing is going to look familiar to you. So engineer Bill Chappell, a paranormal skeptic, developed a way to take a Connect camera from an Xbox 360 and use it to map all the figures in a room. In the paranormal world, this is more commonly known as an SLS camera. SLS stands for Structured Light Sensor. So as you can see from this image, it takes human beings and it can map them out. It can kind of show you where their body is. And then if there's something that our eyes can't see but the Connect camera can, it will also map out that figure as well. Now, it was around this time that paranormal investigation groups were also starting to form and TV shows about paranormal investigations began. Formed in 1990, the Atlantic Paranormal Society, or TAPS, became the subject of the first widely broadcast ghost hunting show, Ghost Hunters, which first aired in 2004. Now, most of those things from the 20th century are still in use today. Some newer equipment is constantly being developed, though. Newer paranormal investigation equipment includes things like the Ovilus, which was developed by Bill Chappell. The Ovilus has a built-in dictionary, and it's believed that spirits can manipulate through electromagnetic power to select the word that they want to use to communicate. Another more recently developed piece of equipment is something called a dead bell. It looks like a regular reception bell, like what would have been used in days past. The thought is that spirits will likely remember what a bell is like from their lifetime and be more willing to interact with it. It can ring by being tapped at the top like a regular bell, but it also has sensors that can detect changes in EMF, and those changes can make the bell ring as well. Okay, so I promised I would give you some additional details about this picture that I shared in my introduction slide. Well, I also do paranormal investigations as one of my hobbies. And in this picture, you'll see me at Waverly Hills Sanatorium with my son during an investigation. We have with us one of the pieces of equipment I mentioned tonight, the Ovilus. I wanted to share with you a little bit about what got me interested in the paranormal and believing in ghosts. So when I was little, I used to have a friend who would come visit me and talk to me and play with me in my room. It was a man in a yellow raincoat. So this isn't exactly what the man looked like, but this is exactly what the raincoat and hat looked like. He told me stories about his life. We sang songs, we played games, and for the longest time I had no idea that he wasn't real. Now, I mentioned him to my mother, and in doing so, I discovered that the two foster children that they had had before they had me had also seen this man, and they always just called him the ship captain. So it's the man in the yellow raincoat. We apparently shared similar stories. We had similar encounters with him. So it's something that, despite the fact that I never met them until I was much older, it's something we shared in common, which kind of leads some credibility to the fact that there was someone there. We both saw the same person. All three of us saw the same person, and we never discussed it with each other. Okay, so how can we do our own research? Well, where do we find spirits to communicate with them? For some of us, we share space with them already. And some of us don't want to know if we're sharing a space with them right now. And that's okay. We don't have to invite them into our homes. We don't have to find out if our house is haunted. There are plenty of locations across the US that are considered to be haunted that offer paranormal investigators a chance to reserve the space and conduct their own investigation. That can give us an opportunity to try to communicate ourselves. So I'm going to start by talking about Waverly Hills Sanatorium, located in Louisville, Kentucky. As I said, my son and I went there back in 2024. We went as part of Amy Bruni's Strange Escapes. We got to work with investigators like Adam Berry, paranormal author Richard Estep, John Tenney, Sean Porter, who's the founder of Ghost Stop, and Bill Chappell, who, as I mentioned, has created paranormal investigation items like the Ovilus and the SLS. So Waverly Hills was a hospital for tuberculosis patients back in the early 1900s. When it first opened, the treatment included things like fresh air. So patients' beds would be wheeled outside so they could be exposed to the fresh air. So you can see here how the whole front was just open. Beds would be rolled out through the doors and placed in this walkway so that they could just be outside in the fresh air. Many patients died within the walls of Waverly Hills, and today it is considered one of the most haunted places in the world. There are shadow people, there are slamming doors, there's a floating man in white who appears to be a doctor on his rounds. Lights are on where there is no electricity, and even faces appearing in windows have been reported. Now, when we were there, we had someone use the Ovilus to ask us to pray for them. My son had his arm touched, and a group of us saw something moving down the end of a hallway where no one was. We also had a water bottle start making noise right behind me. You know that crinkling that a water bottle makes? Well, that was right behind me. Unmistakable that something was manipulating that water bottle. There are some other great locations you can also visit. In Weston, West Virginia, there is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Nearby in Williamson, West Virginia, there is the Old Hospital on College Hill. In Estes Park, Colorado, there is the Stanley Hotel. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, there is the Eastern State Penitentiary. Gettysburg National Military Park in Gettys, Pennsylvania, in addition to pretty much the entire town of Gettysburg, has seen its fair share of paranormal activity. And then there is the Lizzie Borden House in Fall River, Massachusetts, and you can go there and you can stay overnight and do a paranormal investigation. Now, you don't have to go alone though. You can actually find and get involved in your own local paranormal group. I would advise, however, vetting them beforehand. Make sure that they don't believe that every little bump or noise is a ghost. They should have a healthy bit of skepticism and work to debunk whatever evidence is that they collect. Going with a group like that also means you don't have to buy any or much of your own equipment. Now, you might choose to try some experiments on your own, and you don't need expensive equipment to do these. I have seen experiments done with simple Maglite flashlights. They just need to be the kind with a little twisty end that can be twisted on and off. You just leave it slightly untwisted, just enough that it won't activate the flashlight without it twisting a little bit more, but not so much that it's going to take a lot of work to twist the flashlight on. This is great for yes or no questions. Things like those cat balls that light up if moved. These can work great if you're not in a drafty space. You can find a way to keep these still, and then spirits can move them when they want to get your attention. Now, if you don't have a digital recorder to record voices, you can always use the voice recording feature on your phone. My advice is to always be a skeptic, but be willing to admit if something can't be debunked. So I'm going to show you a few of the tools that I use when I do paranormal investigations. So I'm going to start with my digital recorder. So I just have a regular old digital recorder. The nice thing about this one is that it's rechargeable, and I can plug it right into my computer and download the files, which will allow me to not just hear, but to actually see the WAV files. I also have an EMF. I also have a spirit box. Now, with these, you just turn them on. It'll connect automatically. So, one piece of advice, mine automatically goes to FM. I have the high school across the street, and they have an FM station. So if I just scan FM, I pick up that radio station every time through, and I hear the words. So I always switch to AM, and then I do my scan, and I let it sweep through. Now, spirits can use that to communicate. Now, another thing that I do is what's called the Estes method, where the person who is listening to this will have on a blindfold, they will have on headphones, and they will only hear whatever information is coming through this. They won't hear the person asking the questions or any of that. They just have the headphones on. They're completely immersed in whatever's coming out of the spirit box. I also have a video camera that I got special for doing paranormal investigations. I have the Envoy. So the Envoy, I have letters that it can scroll through, and so spirits can choose letters. It also moves to a yes or no feature. They can choose numbers. Or my favorite, they can choose faces. And it also, as you go through, has sensors so it'll detect different things if you just want to keep track of the actual numbers. Now, I have this little scope that I use for thermal imaging, so that I can just take a look. It's a quick little simple thing. I just look right through the viewfinder and I can see, hot spots, cold spots, etc. So that's one of my other tools that I use. And I also have an Ovilus. So with the Ovilus, go in here to the dictionary, and then spirits can choose words out of the dictionary. So like I got tease and beer. Stare. So they can choose different words out of it. There's a couple other features that these do, but these are great for communicating with spirits, particularly those who have used one before. There's a little bit of a learning curve with something like this. When it comes to taking still pictures, I use just my regular phone. I will say that my philosophy is you should take multiple pictures in the exact same spot, because then you can very easily debunk anything. You can tell if there's a lens flare, if there's something that didn't come out crystal clear. If you've got 4 shots and in one of them you have an orb and you don't in the other 3, you can say with higher probability that there was actually something there. The other piece of equipment that I have is a dead bell. So the nice thing with a dead bell is it can work just like that, or you can turn on the dead bell and it will actually use electromagnetic frequencies to ring. Now, I have just a regular old magnet here. I actually got it when I went to the Grand Ole Opry. It's just a regular magnet. I'm going to turn this on. Now, I want you to see that's all the way on. So I'm going to turn it pretty low so it's not on a whole lot. And this is how it works, the magnet. So you'll actually hear So that's what it does with the magnets. That's how you can tell that it's working with the magnet. Notice it's not doing anything now. I can put my phone up to it. It's not going. But I use this for yes, no questions. So anybody hanging out that wants to come and say hello, can you ring once for yes and twice for no? It's very quiet. Normally I ask that and I immediately get an answer. Anyone want to come say hello? I think I got a no and then a yes. Anybody like to just ding once and let me know you're here? Thank you. Can you say hello one more time just by dinging once? Ding one more time just to say hi? Okay, well, this is a nice way to communicate and ask yes no questions. Sometimes you'll get answers, sometimes you won't. So I'm going to leave you with a little story. My husband is a skeptic. He bordered on being a non believer for a very long time. This is before I started doing investigations. It wasn't really a common topic in our home at the time. Well, we have a clock that is way up above the doorway to my office. As you can see from this picture, it's pretty securely up there. It's almost a ceiling height. By the way, it is on a nail hooked into what they call a keyhole latch. So keyhole latch, in other words, it goes down in, so it has to go up and over to actually come off the wall. One night he was walking through our kitchen, and he wasn't walking right next to the door. He was walking a ways out, and that clock came crashing down right in front of him. It narrowly missed hitting him in the head. The thing is, it didn't land right below where it was in the wall. My husband was walking over toward the island, and it landed at his feet. So the clock had to arch itself to land where it did, which is something that physics can't explain. The keyhole latch is still intact, the nail is still in the wall, so it had to have lifted up and over to come off the wall and crash in front of him. My husband shifted from a non-believer to a healthy skeptic that day. As he climbed up the step stool to put it back on the wall, I could actually hear him say, "I'm sorry for whatever it is I did." So I want to thank you for sharing this time with me. It has been my pleasure to get to talk to you a little bit about the paranormal. I'll leave you with my email address, and I'm going to see if anybody wants to say goodbye. Want to come say goodbye? Will you ring? Bye. Thanks for watching.